What's up, everyone? Welcome to another one of our MLB DFS DraftKings Picks videos, this time for Tuesday, August 24th. We have a ton to get into. Just to begin us, I am your host, Justin Bales. I said yesterday that Ben Hostler would be back today. I lied. He's not. It is just me. Once again, I do have a pretty jam-packed pod for you guys. If you are new to this will just seem like everything's normal. If you watch this on a daily basis, I'm going to add a little bit of strategy in before I go over today's slate. But as always, please go ahead and give us a thumbs up if you like the content, not the comment. Give us a comment and say literally anything you want, who you're playing, what your favorite pitcher is, home run call, anything. I will respond to you throughout the day if you have any questions. We're going to continue. You guys have been awesome in terms of engagement. If we keep that up, we can push for some free stuff on the show. I absolutely love that, and I hope that we can be able to do it. But for now, I want to get into a little bit of the strategy before we actually get to more or less what the normal type of video for this will be. So yesterday we had Daniel Lynch throwing against the Houston Astros. Terrible matchup. Lynch has on face value been throwing reasonably well since being called back up, but all his advanced metrics suggest that he hasn't been throwing well. And I was going back and forth with someone in the comments who were kind of talking about Lynch and what's more important if he's throwing this well, if he's not actually throwing that well. And I just kind of want to give a little bit of my perspective of what I use daily, because I focus much more heavily on the predictive analytics, kind of using the stats that are available to predict what's going to happen in the future rather than focusing on solely current form where a guy's just kind of avoiding regression and everything. So an easy way to put it is, say for a hitter, if you have a hitter that you essentially know is going to hit 300 on the season, you also know that in 100 plate appearances against aces or an opposing team's number one, they're going to hit 100. That tells you that in the rest of their 400 plate appearances, assuming a 5-man rotation is just what I'm going with here, they will hit 350 instead of the normal 300. So obviously you don't want to use them against the aces when they're hitting 100. You want to use them against the rest when they're hitting 350. And you could break this down into, SP1, SP2, SP3, SP4, SP5. I'm just trying to keep this super simple. It also goes for a start to finish type thing. Say, Christian Yelich is going to end the season with a 300 average, and in his first 100 plate appearances, he has a 100 average. Well, that means over his final 400, assuming again 500 plate appearances on the season, he's going to hit 350, which then obviously you want to attack because you know that Christian Yelich is due for positive regression. And there are stats and everything that can predict this. You can join us at chatdfs.com and we can talk about all of them and everything. It just goes into, you can see how well someone's essentially playing based on BABIP, hard hit percentage, everything like that. So there are a lot of stats that can help predict this. For pitchers, if you know that a pitcher is going to end the season with a 3 ERA, and in the first half of the season, let's just say 90 innings, they have 45 earned runs or a 4.5 ERA, you know that in the second half of the season, assuming the same 90 innings, they will end with only 15 earned runs or a 1.5 ERA. Obviously, they're not throwing well in the first half of the season. You don't want to be using them then, but in the second half of the season with only a 1.5 ERA, that's obviously a pitcher that you want to start using. This is all based on just positive regression. You can use numbers like xFIP. I know people like Sierra. They now have expected ERA. There's a ton of advanced metrics out there that will help you predict how well a pitcher's throwing. You can also use, obviously hard hit percentage, just all that stuff. So I don't want to get too into that because we do have a very large slate and we have a lot to get under. But in terms of the Daniel Lynch thing, we were going back and forth because Daniel Lynch on face value has been throwing well. His advanced metrics were not well, suggesting that he's just more or less getting lucky. The most recent example that comes to mind, just because I know that some people in our Discord did like him, I guess, earlier when it was happening, but when Spencer Watkins came up to the pros, he came in relief, had a 6.7 ERA in 1 inning, which basically tells us nothing. But in his next 3 starts after that, he allowed 3 earned runs in roughly 15 innings, a little bit more than that. But his xFIP never sat below 4.69. It sat in the mid-5s, more or less, a couple of times in those games. So then in his last 5 starts, he has now given up 4 or more earned runs in each of those starts. He hasn't been throwing overly deep in the game besides 6 innings against the Rays, in which he gave up 5 runs, 4 earned. So the regression was always going to come. I had to get back to the mean, his ERA, and just because he was throwing well for face value doesn't mean that he actually was throwing well. It just means that, more or less he was getting his lucky. His BABIP was low. His exit velocity was still relatively high. He wasn't really getting ground balls, yet he was getting plenty of outs. So there's a lot that goes into it, and there are pitchers that can avoid regression. So it's not a perfect science. On top of it, after his first start against Toronto, when he gave up 1 run over 5 innings, he had a 5.23 ERA. That's after a 6.7 or xFIP. After a 6.7 xFIP coming in 1 inning against the Angels, you probably wouldn't have wanted to use Spencer Watkins against the White Sox. He then went on 4.1 innings, 1 earned run, and 4 strikeouts. So he was a valuable asset. On top of that, the next game, 1 earned run over 6 innings, 7 strikeouts against the Rays. That would have been a great start for him in terms of fantasy. Obviously, that someone like me would have avoided because of the matchup and the regression that was due. So it's not a perfect science, and you can beat it. It's just when we're playing DFS, we play in a game of probabilities. So you're always looking for the most likely situation to happen. And then also you want to use expected ownership when making plays and stacks and pitchers and everything like that. Say Spencer Watkins has a 20% chance of being the highest scoring pitcher on the slate. He's only owned at 5%. Yes, you obviously want to use him in that situation. That's a very drastic thing. You're not really going to get numbers like that. But to make my case, I just wanted to really hammer down like a ridiculous scenario so you guys understand. But if you have any questions about this, please leave them in the comments. It's just when I'm personally looking at my stuff, I try to predict the future rather than looking at the past. So that isn't to say Daniel Lynch didn't throw well last night. He actually did throw pretty well. I looked at all the numbers. His xFIP was sitting in the 4s, so he didn't dominate them by any means, but he actually did throw much better than I was anticipating. I'll easily take my loss on that one. I would have expected a lot worse of a start, so no issues there. But I did want to let you guys know kind of where my head's at when I'm discussing things on the slate, and I more or less am dealing with trying to predict the future, or at least giving myself the best probability of what's going to happen in the future, rather than taking a box score and just looking at it and deciding that that's more or less what I'm going to use moving forward. But we do have a large 14-game slate tonight. I think it's important that we get down to it. Before that, you can get all of our content at dfskarma.com. You'll find free articles. That's where Ben posts final thoughts. I do final thoughts on Sunday. We have all that. Sam does outstanding projections. We have everything like that. At Bet Karma, you can find all of our betting articles. We're pumping out content left and right at the moment. And you can get our premium subscriptions on both sites. The core plays for DFS Karma, you get into our premium chat. Bet Karma, it gets you all of our data-driven picks and bets and everything. Both are fantastic options. You can also get into our Discord for free, chatdfs.com. I would highly recommend at least getting in, even if you're not purchasing a package, because we'll give out advice all day, every day. It's really just a fun community to have. And then I also do want to mention Jock Market. It is a new app that we partnered with, JOCKMKT. Download it. Use promo code KARMA when depositing to get up to 100%, or to get 100% deposit bonus up to $50. Once again, it's been really profitable. You can get into our Discord, chatdfs.com, and we give out jock market picks and plays and strategies for 100% free. You don't have to pay for that. And I believe I've now been profitable 4 of the last 5 nights. I'm trying out a new strategy, and I want, a little more data to know how good it is. But I found quite a bit of success with that. And I think with that, we can move on to the slate. But once again, before we do, go ahead. If you enjoy the content, give us a thumbs up. If you have any questions, please comment them. And we can get rolling here. It's a massive slate. There's a lot of pitchers that make sense tonight. There's a lot of pitchers that we're really going to attack. But it seems pretty clear to me what needs to be done. I think at the top, the number 1 pitching option is going to be Corbin Burnes at 10-6. If you can get to him 100%, you should, especially in cash. At the top as well, though, Jack Flaherty, especially on DraftKings, where he isn't quite priced up. He's 10-3 on FanDuel, but only 9-6 on DraftKings. So Jack Flaherty is a very good option as well, and I do believe that you can pair Corbin Burnes and Flaherty together. I have no issues with that at all. Keeping with the higher priced options, you have someone like Charlie Morton. We know that the Yankees offense has been solid in recent games, but at the same time, they strike out at one of the highest rates on the slate over the last 14 days. And we saw, and I have a really good game last night against them. So Charlie Morton, I do believe, is a GPP option. You probably won't go there in cash because you're just going to go up to Flaherty, or you can drop down to German Marquez. He has been throwing at an extremely high level on the season. I mean, more or less one of my favorite pitchers. I love him. xFIP under 3.5. His strikeout rate's only 25%, but he obviously gets the ideal matchup against the Cubs, who are striking out at almost 30% of the time over the last 14 days, which is by far the highest on the slate. I think the Yankees are second at 27%, so almost 3% more. And obviously their team WOBA is one of the lower ones on the slate, although it's not nearly as low as some of the other teams that are really, really struggling but aren't quite striking out as much. Someone that I didn't necessarily want to consider, but you kind of have to in this matchup, is Madison Bumgarner. He's 7,100. Not throwing well on the season. His ERA sits a little above 4. His xFIP sits at 4.65, which is actually really, really bad. And his strikeout rate is down to roughly 20%, only slightly higher than that. With that said, the Pittsburgh Pirates, their offense is just pathetic at the moment. Over the last 14 days, Team WOBA is 256. I believe it's the lowest on the slate, and I think it's the lowest by quite a margin. Their strikeout rate, which the one thing the Pirates didn't do prior to the trade deadline and everything was strikeout, their strikeout rate is now at 26%, one of the highest on the slate. So you have to at least consider Madison Bumgarner in tournaments. I do think he's relatively viable for 7,100. On FanDuel, I will probably just avoid 88's way too expensive for how bad he's been throwing. I would just rather use someone like Luis Garcia, who's 8,300 and just obviously missed price even in a bad matchup. I just prefer someone like that to Bumgarner instead of spending up there. But other options on the slate, I think someone like Jose Barrios can be used. Luis Garcia on FanDuel, I think, is a very viable option. If you want to use someone like Tyler McGill, I think there's upside there. Tanner Hauck is a great play. He's actually throwing extremely well. He's under 8,000, which kind of doesn't show in terms of, his advanced metrics. His xFIP's one of the lowest on the slate. He does have quite a bit of strikeout potential. It's just, I don't know if you can necessarily trust him to be locked into 90 pitches. He's only gone above 75 in 2 of his last 5 starts. He only threw 58 in his last one. So there is some risk there, especially for 7,900, but I do think that he's at least a viable option. Right below him, another viable play, but also very risky, is Eli Morgan. I just don't love where he's at the moment, but he does get a solid matchup against Texas, who obviously is not very good, and there is some strikeout upside there for Morgan. So no real issues if you want to go there in tournaments. In cash, you're just playing Marquez in that spot, though, and I prefer Hauck to Morgan. So if you're using one of the two, I would just prefer Hauck in that situation. And then if you want to go all the way down, there's not much there. But I guess if you want to take a shot on someone like Justin Steele and he's just getting a matchup against Colorado on the road, I don't really have too many issues with that. He got up to, I believe, 82 pitches in his last game, and his metrics don't look that bad, especially for his price. His xFIP's at a 3.69. His strikeout rate's almost 28%. So I do think that Justin Steele is very viable. Overall, though, I think you're putting a heavy focus on Corbin Burnes, Jack Flaherty, and German Marquez. I think that all of them make very good options. They're the cash pool, and then you can add, a few extra guys that I talked about in tournaments. In terms of stacks, I'll keep this kind of simple where we're at. I won't go into a ton. I think the very clear-cut stack is the Boston Red Sox. They get a matchup against Griffin Jacks. They've been on absolute fire. There's really no reason not to use them if you're stacking in cash. I think that's pretty clear-cut for me as the number one stacking option, and no one else is even really that close. Other options that you can use, more for tournaments, would be the Los Angeles Angels. I really like the matchup against Spencer Watkins, which we kind of talked about earlier when we referred to his regression. I like the Houston Astros against Brady Singer. I think that really you can use someone like the Tampa Bay Rays, who have been on fire against Ranger Suarez, who I actually believe is a relatively good pitcher, but, he's due for a bit of regression because his ERA is so low. His xFIP's 3.67, so it's not like he's, throwing at a low level or anything. He's actually been good, but the Rangers have been outstanding and have a few guys that dominate left-handed pitching, so I do like the matchup against Ranger Suarez there as well. If there's anyone that you're considering, because there are a ton of stacks that I feel like can be used, you can add like the Baltimore Orioles. You can add the Cleveland Guardians. I mean, there's a ton of stacks that can be considered on this slate. So if there's someone that you like that I didn't mention, please just mention in the comments. I'll let you know what I think of them. There's way too many for me to just, casually go over them. So that's kind of where I'm sitting at, and we can head into position by position. At catcher, there's a lot of options that can be considered. I think JT Realmuto, if you're spending up, makes sense. Will Smith, depending on who's starting for San Diego. It might be Yu Darvish. If it is, that's going to knock Will Smith down quite a bit. Mike Zunino is 4,200. That's way too cheap for literally any matchup he's in against a left-handed pitcher. Max Stassi is 4,500, assuming he's hitting in the heart of the Los Angeles Angels order. I do think that he's a solid play. If you want to drop down, you have someone like Trey Barrea at, I believe, 2,200. I think that would be the pretty clear spend down on this slate. Yeah, I guess you could go with someone like Jonah Heim at 2,400. Both of them make very good options. And then in the mid-tier, you have guys like Christian Vasquez or Jacob Stallings, I actually like against Madison Bumgarner. So that's quite a few options that I think you can consider at catcher. There's just plenty on the slate because there's 14 games, and that just gives you a ton of options everywhere. At first base, if you can get up to Shohei Ohtani, I think that's a very obvious play. Watkins isn't good. Ohtani just dominates right-handed pitching, so that's a pretty easy play. The problem is he's 6,400. I think if you want to go cheaper, Jared Walsh on the same team, obviously same matchup, is 4,600. He's been very good against right-handed pitching this season. If you can spend in between them, my option would be Max Muncy, depending on the pitcher, slightly over Vlad Guerrero Jr. If Yu Darvish is starting, I probably don't go really in this tier. I probably try to spend all the way up to Ohtani or drop down to someone like Walsh. Right above Walsh at 48, you have CJ Cron. 43 and 39, you have Trey Mancini and Ryan Mountcastle. I'm fine with both of them. You can use someone like Brandon Belt for cheaper. Pete Alonso is still only 4,400. So a lot of really solid options on the slate. I think that guys like Josh Bell at 4K, or if you want to spend all the way down, Ryan Zimmerman gets a matchup against a weak left-handed pitcher in Luzardo, who's really been struggling this season. So 2,700 for Ryan Zimmerman makes a really, really good play. And I think we can move to second base, since that is a lot of options for you guys to really consider there. Second base, I think you probably start with Kike Hernandez at 49. It's a little too cheap for the matchup. Obviously, I love Boston. He's going to be my top play. I think you can spend on guys around him. Trey Turner's 5, Ozzy Albies is 57, Semion's 51, Altuve's 54. Like, there's so many good options. It's just, if I'm spending right around that price range, especially because they're all more expensive than Hernandez, I'm literally just sticking with Hernandez unless you want to go somewhere else in tournaments just to get leverage. If you have to drop down a little bit, I do think that Jorge Polanco is a solid option, even in a tough matchup against Hauck. He's only 3,700, which just seems a bit too cheap. So I think that's probably the guy that I spend down on at this position. Third base, it's going to be Devers. You're just going to play him. You plug him in, you move along. I play him a ton against right-handed pitching. This is an elite matchup against a righty in Boston, so I'm plugging him in even for 59. That's the guy that I want to use. If you want the perfect pivot, Jose Ramirez has been on fire. He's 100 cheaper. I think the majority of people probably just lean Devers in that spot, so I do think you can get Ramirez relatively low owned. Austin Riley at 51 against a lefty that gives up home runs. I'm not going to try to talk you out of it or anything. And then I guess you can use guys like Patrick Wisdom is at least reasonable. Not my favorite play, but at 4,400, I do think he's in play. Okay, Brian Hayes against Bumgarner. I do like that quite a bit. I think that he's a really solid option. And then you have guys like Ramon Urias for 29 if you need to drop way down. Luis Arraez at 29 as well. So there are some options that you really can consider here for pretty cheap. At shortstop, I feel like you guys know that I'm just going to talk Xander Bogaerts here as the cash option. The big problem and the decision you're going to have to make is that obviously if you want to play Flaherty and Burns together, it's going to be tough to get all the expensive guys for Boston. So you kind of have to choose which guys you're going to use, unless you want to use a pitcher. Like, I think that Marquez is the top guy that's going to give you some salary relief, and that's probably where I would go just because of the matchup against the Cubs anyway. But I mean, there's plenty of spots to go on this slate. I think that Bogaerts is the clear-cut top option. I think you can use basically any of the expensive guys. I don't really have too many issues with. It's just that I don't see a ton of reason to use them instead of Bogaerts, unless, like, obviously you just want someone like Fernando Tatis Jr. and you're using it to get leverage because he's basically the same price and going to feature significantly lower ownership. And obviously Tatis is a player that can destroy him basically any given slate. If you want to drop down a bit, Ahmed Rosario against a bad left-handed pitcher at 4,000 is just a bit too cheap. I think that he's a really good play on this slate. I'm not sure that I'm going to drop below him. I think that 4,000 might be kind of where I'm sitting at. I do think if you want to drop down a little bit lower, Nicky Lopez at 3,000 is the option that you're going to go to. But I don't really want to use him too bad against Garcia on the slate. So I think Ahmed Rosario is probably the lowest that you go. And if you don't drop down there, you probably try to go Xander Bogaerts or one of the other higher priced options at shortstop, which, you know, obviously that tends to be the case for the position. It's just so top heavy. In the outfield, you have the Boston guys. I'm not going to bore you by telling you why they're so good. You know that Boston's my favorite stack. You have the Tampa Bay guys that hit left-handed pitching well, Nelson Cruz or Randy Arozarena. I think that both of them are great plays on the slate. Cedric Mullins at 4,500 in a plus matchup against Dylan Bundy, I think is a very good play. Let's see, where else are we going? I guess you can use basically any of the Baltimore guys. I think that Austin Hayes is fine. I would put him in a tier below Cedric Mullins and Anthony Santander. At 3,400, if you need some salary relief, Justin Upton is very interesting against Watkins. I have no issues there at all. If Victor Robles is leading off against Luzardo at 2,000, that's the exact type of salary relief that you need to get you know, the Boston guys in there. So Robles is going to be a very good option, but we need to wait and see and make sure that he's leading off. Miles Straw continues to be underpriced at 2,800. I think that he is a really, really good option, especially against Hearn tonight. On the other side of that game, Adolis Garcia, I have no problems if you want to use him for under 3,000. You have guys like Lamont Wade in a decent matchup. Jorge Soler obviously gets a matchup against a fly ball lefty, so no issues at all there. I think more or less that's a pretty large pool. The only other guy that I'll add that I guess I didn't say, Manuel Margot at 2,700 is just way too cheap. But that's a pretty large pool that I gave you guys. I don't want to, you know, outline literally every bat on this slate. So I think that's about where I'm going to sit. And if you have any questions about any hitters in specific, any stacks, any pitchers, literally any strategy questions, anything you guys just want to know, please, by all means, mention it in the comments. I will respond and give you my thoughts on it. Thank you again for watching. If you enjoy the content, please go ahead, give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. You can turn on the notifications. We're going to have NFL stuff coming out very soon. Again, Jock Market is a great app. I'm telling you guys, I've had a blast playing it. Leading up to lock, it's such a fun thing because you're just bidding against other people during the IPO, which you're not sure when it's going to end, so it's kind of like a suspense thing. But tomorrow, I can confirm, I've talked to him this morning, Ben will be back tomorrow. If I get a text tomorrow morning that I'm doing a solo pod again, maybe we just are going to keep it for the rest of time. But once again, thank you for watching. Home run call, Mike Zunino. We nailed Yan Gomes last night. I've had a lot of success with weird catchers hitting home runs that I've called on the pod, so very happy with that. I'm going to go Mike Zunino tonight. Everyone else, drop your home run calls in the comments. Let's see who can hit them. And good luck. I hope everyone wins on the slate.